Hi, this is Josh here with Fight Bad Medicine. Today I want to talk to you about how you could kill Candida by eating carbs. I know what you're thinking. This is crazy talk. We were taught you should limit or even eliminate grains, starchy vegetables, fruits, the high glycemic fruits in order to kill Candida, in order to starve it. What I'm here to tell you today is that I was under that impression for years. And I found out in the past few months that this concept is totally not true. So I'm going to tell you exactly what happened 3 months ago. I decided that I'm going to switch over to a whole foods plant-based diet. Not because of the Candida at all. It had nothing to do with Candida, but I started doing some research and I started watching some videos by some doctors that talked about plant-based eating. Dr. Michael Greger, Dr. McDougall, Dr. Neil Bernard. So these guys are real proponents of eating vegan, of eating whole food plant-based diets, and how it can prevent cancer, how it can prevent heart disease. And I saw these guys, and they're all thin. So we always thought that you eat carbs, you're going to get fat. And I see these guys, and they're little skinny pickles, and I'm wondering what's going on here. Have I been taught a lie all these years? So I began to eat brown rice. I began to eat quinoa. Began to eat beans, oats. And in pretty good amounts in order to substitute for the meat that I was eating, the fish, the eggs. And I didn't really eat dairy much up until this point, maybe once or twice a week. I didn't eat much gluten during the week. So I ate pretty healthy, and my plate was mostly vegetables, and I had fruits during the day. Mostly low glycemic fruits. But here I am changing my diet entirely, where I was always trying to stay away from the starches, mostly because of weight gain and also because of gut issues. I was always taught, not to go too heavy on the grains, stick with your, animal protein, not too much, maybe, 4 or 5 ounces, and then some non-starchy vegetables. But here I am eating bowls full of brown rice and beans, and still lots of vegetables. But I never imagined in the past few years that I would go back to eating all these carbs. So guess what happened? I didn't gain a pound. My digestion improved. My mood improved. My sleep improved. That was incredible. But then the unexpected happened. So I've had a battle with Candida for the past, I would say even 5 years, where I have these chronic bouts of athlete's foot where my feet start to itch even after wearing shoes just for maybe an hour or two. And it was really awful. And all of a sudden I found that like 2 weeks after I started eating like this, the itch was gone. And I was like, what is going on here? I was always taught that all these grains and all these starches were going to cause the Candida to grow. So if anything, it should have gotten a lot worse. And here it is. Not only am I feeling good and sleeping better, but my Candida is disappearing. So I said, this can't be right. But now it's 3 months into eating like this, and I gotta say, I am amazed by what's happening. I knew that Chinese medicine actually talks about how the most important thing when it comes to Candida is actually supporting the liver and supporting the pancreas, and not necessarily killing off the Candida by starving it. But I never really stuck to that view. I was taught that the starches will raise your blood sugars, and they're going to feed the Candida. But if you eat things like animal protein, it's not going to really raise your blood sugar. So I want to talk a little bit physiologically. Why this happens. So number one, you got to think about the glucose metabolism. Where does glucose metabolism happen? It happens in the liver. So you're talking about like gluconeogenesis. That's how the drug metformin works, where it inhibits the production of glucose and letting out of glucose from the liver, which would in turn raise your blood sugar. And then you have the pancreas, which is responsible for pumping out insulin, right? So if the pancreas is not working properly, you're not going to produce enough insulin, blood sugars go up. The kidneys are also important because they actually just filter everything out. They if you have too much sugar in your body, it's going to filter it out. That's why you see with diabetics that their urine actually has a sweet odor, because they're filtering out all this glucose. So you really, when it comes to your glucose levels, maybe we should be paying attention, not so much about like what foods may raise your glucose in the short term, but maybe what foods are there to support the organs that are meant to regulate the blood sugar. So when you think about that, animal proteins, whether it's beef or chicken, even fish, eggs, dairy, these things can really hinder the liver, the pancreas, the kidneys from doing the jobs they need to do. They're working too hard. If the liver is working so hard to metabolize the fats and even lean protein, to metabolize the animal proteins, it's going to hinder the liver's ability for glucose metabolism. It's going to hinder the ability of the pancreas to put out the proper amount of insulin. It's going to hinder the kidneys from getting rid of the excess glucose. It's going to even hinder the gut. Remember, the gut flora are dependent. That would be number 2, where the gut flora are really dependent on these resistant starches. So we're talking about things like, white potatoes and brown rice. These, the evil things when it comes to Candida. But if you think about it physiologically, it actually supports the organs that are meant to metabolize the glucose. But now it supports the gut too, to support the gut flora, which now is very, very important to regulate glucose, as there's certain bacteria that regulate glucose, but also the gut has to be working properly in order to flush out the sugars. And fiber helps that. Fiber helps out flush the sugars. And then number 3 would be detoxification. So if you hinder detoxification, you're not going to be able to, and elimination too, you're not going to be able to get rid of this Candida. So if you're burning these organs, if you're burning the liver and the kidneys and the gut with all these animal proteins, there's no room left for detoxification and elimination. So that's how I would explain it physiologically, why I had that improvement by kind of eating the foods which support these organs, and staying away from the foods that are hindering these organs from functioning properly, to regulate glucose, to regulate detoxification, to regulate elimination, to regulate the gut bacteria. So even though I found it symptomatically, I found it to be really, really helpful. I did find that in the beginning that I did have this, just as a caution, if you do choose to go the plant-based route, the first couple weeks are rough. It actually will turn over your gut microbiome. Like, I had a little bit of discomfort, but my bowel movements actually had improved. But you might get a little bit bloated. That's only because your gut flora is changing. So I would challenge you take 3 or 4 weeks. 3 or 4 weeks is not a lot of time. Try this plant-based way of eating. So when I talk about carbs, I am not talking about, refined sugars and honey, and then you start to get your cookies and your crackers. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about whole whole grains, talking about brown rice, I'm talking about quinoa, talking about rolled oats or steel cut oats, I'm talking about the real foods. I'm talking about beans and peas and lentils. And these will not only substitute the proteins, the animal proteins, but they're actually beneficial because you have to remember these foods have a lot of fiber. So even though maybe they raise your glucose in the short term, the fiber kind of neutralizes that effect. And also it will drag out the glucose. It helps. Beans are very, very beneficial for the kidneys. There's things within the whole grains that are very important for the liver. There's alpha lipoic acid in brown rice alone. There's alpha lipoic acid. There's CoQ10. There's a lot of things in these grains, and the fiber itself is very, very good at helping elimination, which helps detoxification in the long run. So you see here that it's not just, the idea of like, if I put complex carbs in my body, it's going to turn to sugar. It's much deeper than that. With everything in diet, it's not just calories in, calories out, and if I put this in my body, this is how it's going to end up in my body. The body functions the way the foods are metabolized. The body's going to function differently with each type of food, not necessarily how it is in the beginning, but how the body treats that food. I mean, if you talk about, let's say, talk in paleo, people love like talk about bacon or whatever. You have these acrylamides, that are produced by by the well-cooked meats and the barbecued meats, and in the beginning they're not necessarily carcinogenic, but it's what the body does with them that it produces free radicals in the end. Versus you talk about, let's say, blueberries or cherries, you're like, oh wow, like those are going to raise my blood sugar, but you're forgetting about the fiber, you forget about the antioxidants, you forget about neutralizing free radicals. So that's also part of metabolism. So the idea is really that I would challenge you to try this whole foods plant-based diet. Go with the whole grains, go with your legumes, like the beans and the lentils. You got peas in there. So go with these foods, substitute it for all those animal proteins you've been eating. Foods you definitely have to stay away from in general, like if you're not going to go full-fledged, I would say for Candida is dairy, gluten for the most part, refined carbs, even worse, much worse than gluten. Soy can be an issue. Peanuts and alcohol is also will end up turning to a sugar. These things are very dampening foods. It's not so much so that peanuts don't necessarily raise your blood sugar and feed Candida like that, but these are, or even soy, but these are going to cause dampening in the body, which could cause Candida growth. But I would challenge you, give it 3 or 4 weeks and see how you feel. Go ahead. Still do heavy amounts of vegetables. You can even do some, do starchy vegetables and do your fruits. But then go for your whole grains and go for your legumes and see how you feel. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and please comment below. If you have any questions or comments, positive or negative, I don't care. Just leave the comments below. And if you like our channel, please let us know and like us. And if you want to keep receiving fantastic videos like this, please subscribe and check out our other videos. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care. Have a great day.